Good evening and welcome to Dialogue Digest for Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. Today was a particularly busy day as the independent media sphere was abuzz with the exhilarating yet sobering news of Julian Assange's release from Belmarsh prison, while at the same time everyone was still reeling from the terrorist attacks in Russia over the weekend. Here's what's on the docket for today. As always, we'll start out with Alexander Christophorou's review of the news, then the Duran's interview with Brian Berletic. We'll skip Alexander Mercurio's monologue for today since the Berletic interview went plenty long. Then we'll go to Garland Nixon's interview with Laith Marouth, a very, very, very fascinating conversation about the complexities of any potential war between Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Israel. Then we'll go to Nixon's own views on the Assange release. Then we'll hit on Judging Freedom's interviews with Jeffrey Sachs, Kieran Kwiatowski, Matt Ho, and Pepe Escobar. Then we'll hit Dialogue Works interviews with Larry Wilkerson and Jaques Baud. Then we'll go to Glen Greenwald's reporting on Assange's release and his take on the terrorist attacks in Russia. We'll also hit the recent conversation between Alexander Dugin and Pepe Escobar, which was also very, very fascinating. We'll also touch on Danny Haiphong's interview with Richard Medhurst and Russel Brand's interview with Neil Oliver, Tucker Carlson's interview with Steve Staler, Candace Owen's own monologue and a report on Assange and its link to 9/11, or his link to 9/11. Then we'll hit Katie Halper's continued coverage of the perils of anti-Zionist voices in corporate media. Lastly, we hit Kim Iverson's reporting on Julian Assange's release, the Amazon censorship controversy, and Robert Kennedy Jr.'s plan to insert himself into the presidential debates. There's a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Now, I have made it slightly easier by adding timestamps and titles so you can go straight to the section you want to hear first. All right, let's go to Alex Christophorou's news update. Christophorou reported that Julian Assange was released from Belmarsh prison and is set to plead guilty to violating the U.S. Espionage Act. This plea is part of a deal that will see Assange serve time equivalent to what he has already spent incarcerated, including his stay at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Following this, he will return to Australia. Christophorou views this as a positive outcome for Assange and his family, despite the guilty plea, which he suggests was a concession necessary to secure Assange's freedom. The timing of Assange's release, just days before the debate between President Biden and Donald Trump, was noted by Christophorou as particularly strategic. He posits that this move allows Biden to claim a diplomatic victory, potentially swaying voters who are sympathetic to Assange's cause. In contrast, Christophorou criticized Trump for not securing Assange's release during his presidency, instead highlighting the stance of Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence, who condemned the plea deal as a miscarriage of justice. Shifting focus, Christophorou touched upon the heightened tensions between Russia and the United States. He reported on Russia's warning to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow, stating that the U.S.'s involvement in aiding Ukraine's military targets could lead to direct retaliation. Despite these threats, Christophorou mentioned that the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov conveyed Putin's continued openness to negotiations, maintaining the validity of Russia's peace proposal, which Christophorou criticized as delivered not in good timing. Within Ukraine, Christophorou highlighted the controversial remarks made by Ukrainian official who labeled the victims of the attack in Crimea as occupiers, sparking outrage and confusion. He also reported on the dismissal of Ukrainian military commanders, which he interprets as a sign of internal discord and the influence of paramilitary groups on the Ukrainian leadership. In the realm of European politics, Christophorou discussed statements by German opposition leader Friedrich Merz, who called for a ceasefire in Ukraine. This represents a shift in tone from previous hawkish positions, reflecting growing war weariness in Germany and across Europe. A notable revelation in Christophorou's update was the discussion of a peace plan for Ukraine attributed to advisors from Trump's administration. The plan, which Trump purportedly viewed favorably, suggests leveraging military aid to Ukraine as a means to initiate peace talks with Russia. However, Christophorou expressed skepticism about the viability of this plan, considering the complex dynamics of the conflict. Lastly, Christophorou delved into the EU's sanction strategy. focusing on efforts to disrupt Russia's quote-unquote ghost fleet of ships used to circumvent sanctions and maintain energy exports. He criticized the EU's approach as potentially self-defeating, given Europe's reliance on Russian energy. Christophorou's update paints a picture of a world at a crossroads where decisions made in the corridors of power have far-reaching consequences. The release of Julian Assange, the geopolitical chess game between Russia and the West, and the search for an end to the conflict in Ukraine will contribute to an uncertain global landscape. As these narratives unfold, the world watches and waits to see how these pivotal moments will shape the future of international relations. Now let's go to the conversation on the Duran with Brian Berletic. This conversation between Alexander Christophorou, Alexander Mercurius, and Brian Berletic is a deep dive into some of the most pressing geopolitical issues of our time. The dialogue traverses the complex landscapes of the war in Ukraine, the plight of Julian Assange, and the enduring conflict in Gaza, offering insights into the multifaceted nature of global politics. The panelists discuss the ongoing situation of Julian Assange with a tone of concern and urgency. They highlight the implications of his case for journalism and the freedom of the press. The conversation underscores the importance of acknowledging the work of journalists like Assange who dared to reveal inconvenient truths to the public. The panelists express a shared sentiment that Assange's predicament is a reflection of the broader challenges faced by those who seek to hold powerful entities accountable. The war in Ukraine is characterized as a war of attrition, where the West's inability to replace Ukrainian losses quickly enough has led to desperate strategies. The discussion points to the media's portrayal of the conflict, suggesting a narrative that often omits the complexities on the ground. The panelists critique the Western media's distorted reporting, which they argue fails to provide a clear picture of the actual events. They delve into the historical relationship between Russia and China, emphasizing that their alliance is not an anomaly, but a return to historical norms. The conversation also touches upon the West's declining industrial and military capabilities compared to rising powers like China and Russia. While the conversation about Gaza is not detailed in the summary provided, it can be inferred that the panelists would approach this topic with the same analytical rigor and historical context as they do with the other subjects. They would likely discuss the strategic dynamics of the Middle East, particularly Russia, Syria, and the implications of Western-led processes being rejected by the rest of the world. That part needs to be deleted. The panelists explore the geopolitical dynamics between the West, Russia, and China, discussing the potential dangers of escalation and the need for long-term strategic approach over immediate reactions to provocations. They emphasize the importance of Russia and China remaining united and patient in the face of Western pressures. The conversation sheds light on the U.S.'s declining industrial and military capabilities, highlighting the deep state's influence on foreign policy. The panelists express skepticism about the impact of U.S. elections on foreign policy, suggesting that the deep state's agenda often prevails. The discussion concludes with a hopeful note on the potential for a better future if constructive interests replace destructive ones in the West. The panelists advocate for global cooperation and purpose-driven projects, exemplified by initiatives like SpaceX, as opposed to profit-driven approaches. In essence, the conversation between Christophorou, Mercurius, and Berletic is a testament to the complexity of international relations and the importance of informed discourse. It serves as a reminder of the interconnectedness of global events and the need for a nuanced understanding of the forces that shape our world. All right, now let's go on to Garland Nixon's interview with Laith Marouth. In this conversation between Garland Nixon and Laith Marouth presents a complex tapestry of geopolitical tensions and historical grievances in the Middle East, particularly focusing on Lebanon, Palestine, Gaza, and Israel. The dialogue delves into the precarious balance of power and the looming threat of a cataclysmic war that could have far-reaching consequences. The discussion opens with analysis of Hezbollah's growing military capabilities, which pose a significant deterrent against Israeli aggression. The Lebanese political and militant group has demonstrated a capacity to retaliate, which serves as a critical factor in the volatile equilibrium between Lebanon and Israel. The conversation underscores the potential for escalation, noting that any Israeli incursion could trigger a robust response from Hezbollah, potentially leading to a broader regional conflict. The conversation shifts to address the recent terrorist attacks in Russia, drawing parallels with the broader instability in the Middle East. The situation in Yemen is highlighted, where Ansar Allah, the Houthis, has employed drones and surface drones against Israeli targets, signaling a new era of warfare that could involve various factions from the quote-unquote axis of resistance. Marouth and Nixon discussed the Iraqi resistance stance against the presence of U.S. troops in the region. Their narrative critiques the U.S. military's role, suggesting that any aggressive posture by the United States or its allies could provoke a significant backlash from local resistance groups, potentially leading to substantial American casualties and a reevaluation of U.S. interests in Africa and the Middle East. The conversation takes a very serious and sobering turn as it contemplates the possibility of a broader war involving multiple actors from the axis of resistance. Such a conflict could have devastating effects not only in terms of human casualties, but also in its geopolitical ripple effects, destabilizing an already fragile region and impacting global security. The interview would not be complete without considering the historical context of colonialism and imperialism that has shaped the current landscape in the Middle East. The strategic importance of the region, coupled with the cultural and religious factors, contributes to the resilience of the fighting spirit of the Muslim and Christian populations. The conversation pays homage to a powerful legacy of sacrifice and justice in the Arab culture, which continues to inspire resistance against foreign domination. The dialogue offers a critical perspective on the mismanagement and superiority complex of Western powers. It suggests that the refusal to accept a multipolar world and equality among nations has led to economic and cultural decline. The West's inability to adapt to changing global dynamics is portrayed as a fundamental flaw that exacerbates tension and hinders the path to peace. In conclusion, the conversation between Nixon and Marouth serves as a poignant reminder of the stakes involved in the Middle East. It calls for a recognition of the dignity and history of the people in the region and advocates for a just resolution to the conflicts that have long plagued Lebanon, Palestine, Gaza, and Israel. The potential for a cataclysmic war underscores the urgency of diplomatic efforts and the need for a collective commitment to stability and peace. Now we'll talk about Garland Nixon's views on Julian Assange and censorship that he is experiencing on YouTube. The potential release of Julian Assange is a beacon for hope for advocates of transparency. Nixon hails this development as a victory against oppressive censorship, a moment where the quest for truth might finally pierce the veil of secrecy that often shrouds governmental actions. Assange's work with WikiLeaks brought to light the uncomfortable truths of power, war, and diplomacy, challenging the narrative controlled by a few in power. Yet, as Nixon points out, the celebration is marred by the irony of censorship that persists even in the so-called free world. Platforms like YouTube, which have become the modern public squares for discourse and expression, are accused of shadow banning and manipulating visibility, thereby stifling the very essence of free speech they purport to uphold. This alleged censorship by YouTube, marked by a sudden decrease in video views and changes in analytics, raises questions about the authenticity of the platform's commitment to open dialogue. Nixon also highlights the paradoxical stance of the U.S. government, which is, on one hand, promotes public health measures like vaccines and masks, while on the other hand, reportedly engages in covert operations to discredit foreign vaccines in places like China and the Middle East. This duality casts a shadow over the integrity of public messaging and the true intentions behind such communications. The monologue also addresses the legal and constitutional issues surrounding Assange's case, questions of jurisdiction, First Amendment rights, and the fairness of his trial due to alleged spying on his defense team are critical to understanding the broader implications of his situation. These legal battles are not just about one man, but about the principles of justice and the right to know that underpin democratic societies. As Nixon speculates, Assange's future actions, such as potentially creating a show on alternative platforms like Rumble or Telegram, could shift the dynamics of media and public attention. The support Assange receives from the public and the impact his release could have on social media platforms and free speech debates are pivotal, especially in the context of figures like Elon Musk and the evolving landscape of Twitter. On a more personal note, the emotional aspect of Assange reuniting with his family after years of separation cannot be overlooked. The global support he has garnered speaks volumes about the collective yearning for a world where truth is not a casualty of power. In conclusion, Garland Nixon's monologue serves as a powerful commentary on the state of transparency and censorship in our times. It reminds us that the fight for truth is ongoing and that each victory, like Assange's potential release, is a step toward a future where information is not a privilege but a right. As we navigate the murky waters of censorship and control, it is essential to remember the value of an informed public and the role it plays in shaping the destiny of nations. Okay, now let's go on to Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom, and let's start out with the interview with Jeffrey Sachs. In this candid interview with Professor Sachs, they delve into the intricacies of global policies, shedding light on the opaque corridors of power that shape our world. The conversation, marked by its timeliness and gravity, centered around the release of Julian Assange and the broader implications of secrecy in government affairs. Sachs, a renowned economist and public policy expert, articulated a clear stance on the Assange case, aligning with Judge Napolitano's legal perspective. Both agreed that Assange's actions were safeguarded by the precedent set in the Pentagon Papers case, which underscored the inviolability of press when publishing matters of public interest. Sachs went further, lauding Assange for his service to the American people and the world at large, emphasizing the crucial role of transparency in averting global conflicts. The interview highlighted a specific cable leaked by Assange, penned by current CIA Director William Burns in 2008, which starkly opposed the very policies being pursued by the Biden administration today. This cable, according to Sachs, exemplified the kind of truth that, if not for whistleblowers like Assange, would remain concealed from the public eye. And this is the famous "Niet means Niet" cable. Sachs and Napolitano lamented the relentless deception they perceived to be endemic within the U.S. government's foreign policy. Sachs recounted his personal journey from the impact of Pentagon Papers during his high school years to his eventual realization of the pervasive nature of governmental lies. He cited various instances, from coups to wars, where misinformation and secrecy have led to tragic outcomes. The conversation also addressed the direct conflict between the United States and Russia, with Sachs condemning the recklessness of U.S. involvement in Ukraine. He criticized the lack of dialogue between President Biden and President Putin, stressing the urgency for negotiations to prevent further escalations that could lead to nuclear war. Sachs' insights extended to the Middle East, where he discussed the implications of the Israeli Supreme Court's ruling on the ultra-Orthodox draft and the potential for conflict with Lebanon. He expressed concern over Prime Minister Netanyahu's aggressive policies and the risk they posed to regional stability. Going back to his views on the drafting of ultra-Orthodox into the army in Israel, he was definitely for it. He was a proponent for that, since they seem to be one of the most vocal supporters and advocates for widening the war and for reclaiming all of Judea, all of Israel and Palestine as a Jewish homeland. And since they are such vocal advocates for that, it's only fitting that they too should serve in the military, which up to now they have been exempt from. In conclusion, the interview with Jeffrey Sachs served as a powerful reminder of the importance of transparency and truth in governance. It underscored the need for open discourse, responsible leadership, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths for the sake of peace and global security. As the world teeters on the brink of nuclear holocaust, the wisdom imparted by Sachs offers a beacon of hope for a more informed and engaged citizenry. Now let's go on to the interview with Karen Kwiatowski. In this interview, they touch on the intricate web of power, secrecy, and control within the Pentagon, and the broader implications of Julian Assange's release from a British maximum security prison. Assange's release marks the end of a harrowing chapter in the fight for transparency. Despite being coerced into a guilty plea for a single count of conspiracy to commit espionage, Assange's resilience remains a beacon for advocates of free speech and government accountability. His ordeal underlies the disturbing reality of how far governments will go to silence dissent and control information, especially in the West. Kwiatowski sheds light on the Pentagon's inner workings, highlighting instances of preferential treatment of Israeli officials and the blurred lines between military leadership and foreign influence. Her account raises questions about the integrity of the U.S. defense establishment and its susceptibility to external agendas, particularly those of the State of Israel. The interview touches on the tragic use of cluster bombs in Sevastopol, underscoring the human cost of geopolitical conflicts, the indiscriminate violence against civilians perpetrated by the Ukrainian army and aided by the United States, including the children, is a stark reminder of the moral bankruptcy that can pervade military strategies. As the world becomes increasingly digital, the role of cybersecurity and espionage takes center stage. The discussion on Assange's contribution to revealing state secrets via WikiLeaks underscores the evolving nature of warfare, where information is as potent a weapon as any traditional armament. The interview with Kwiatowski is a sobering reflection on the state of global politics and the enduring struggle for truth. It highlights the importance of safeguarding civil liberties and the right to information in an era where secrecy often trumps transparency. As the world grapples with these challenges, figures like Julian Assange serve as reminders of the cost of speaking truth to power and the relentless pursuit of a more open and just society. Now let's go to Judge Napolitano's interview with Matt Ho. Again, they first hit on the release of Julian Assange. While momentous, an occasion for his supporters comes at the cost of a guilty plea to a non-crime, highlighting the paradoxical nature of his freedom. Ho articulates the mixed emotions felt by many: joy for Assange's liberation, juxtaposed with anger over the years of unjust confinement and the toll it has taken on him and his family, emotionally and physically and psychologically. The adjudication of Assange's case in the Mariana Islands serves as a stark reminder of the expansive reach of the American empire. Ho points out the irony of this remote location being the stage for a case that has global ramifications, emphasizing the extent to which American influence permeates. The interview touches upon the chilling effects Assange's ordeal is likely to have on journalism. Ho echoes the sentiment of fellow activists, asserting that Assange's prolonged punishment serves as a dire warning to others who dare to expose governmental misdeeds. The fear of retribution and the pervasive surveillance state have led to self-censorship among journalists, undermining the essence of free press. Ho and Napolitano discuss the dual assaults on the First and Fourth Amendments, with the government's actions against Assange infringing upon freedom and speech and privacy. The case of Edward Snowden is mentioned as a parallel, highlighting the government's extensive surveillance capabilities and the consequent impact on journalistic practices. Despite the relief accompanying Assange's release, Ho underscores that the battle for journalistic freedom and transparency is far from over. The U.S. government's stance on prosecuting journalists remains unchanged, and the precedent set by Assange's case continues to threaten the core values of a democratic society. The interview with Matt Ho serves as a powerful call to remain vigilant in the face of governmental overreach. While Assange's release is a victory for his advocates, it also serves as a sobering reminder of the fragility of our liberties. The interview concludes with a call to action urging citizens to advocate for pardons and to support initiatives that protect the rights of journalists and whistleblowers worldwide. Now let's go to the judge's interview with Pepe Escobar. Pepe Escobar, a seasoned journalist, offers a profound analysis of the intricate web of geopolitical events involving Julian Assange, the recent terrorist attacks in Russia, the alleged role of the United States, and the Russian response. His insights shed light on the complexities of international justice, media freedom, and the stark realities of power politics. Escobar articulates a narrative of resilience in the face of adversity when discussing Julian Assange. He portrays Assange's relief from prison as a victory for journalism, albeit one that comes with significant caveats. The plea deal struck in the Mariana Islands, according to Escobar, is a bittersweet end to a saga of long psychological and physical torture, meant as a deterrent to journalists worldwide. He emphasizes the critical condition of Assange's health, which necessitated his release, and underscores the broader implication of his indictment, viewing it as a criminalization of journalism. Turning to the recent terror attacks in Russia, Escobar's commentary is laced with condemnation for the violence inflicted upon civilians. He describes the attacks as a calculated and vicious act, particularly egregious due to their timing on the Christian Orthodox holiday of Pentecost. Escobar delves into the complexities of Dagestan, highlighting the region's vulnerability to extremism and the intricate web of terrorist networks that operate within its borders. Escobar is critical of the United States' alleged involvement in the attacks, suggesting a covert strategy to divide and rule. He argues that such tactics are intended to sow discord among different ethnic and religious groups within Russia. Escobar's critique extends to broader strategy in the United States in international affairs, implying a pattern of interventionism that often exacerbates conflicts rather than resolving them. In response to these events, Escobar describes a Russia that is both incensed and resolute. He reports a public clamor for decisive action and a no-fly zone over the Black Sea to prevent further attacks. The Russian government's approach, as narrated by Escobar, is methodical, seeking to present irrefutable evidence at the UN Security Council before taking further steps. He predicts a measured but firm response, one that prioritizes national security while adhering to legal frameworks. Pepe Escobar's interview is a testament to the intricacies of power and the quest for justice in a world riddled with with geopolitical tensions. His views on Assange reflect a deep concern for the state of journalism and the right to information. The discussion on terrorism and the United States' role highlights the murky waters of international politics where actions often have unintended and far-reaching consequences. Finally, Russia's response, as interpreted by Escobar, is a reminder of the delicate balance nations must strike between sovereignty, security, and the pursuit of peace. All right, and that concludes all the interviews that Judge Napolitano conducted today. Now let's go on to Dialogue Works' interview, which there's only two of today. The first one was with Larry Wilkerson. Larry Wilkerson's views, as presented in the conversation with Anima at Dialogue Works, offers a critical perspective on various geopolitical issues, particularly focusing on the United States' foreign policy and military actions. Wilkerson, a retired United States Army colonel and former Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell, provides a candid analysis of the political and military landscape, drawing from his extensive experience in government and military service. Wilkerson's discourse is marked by a profound disillusionment with the current state of American politics and its military interventions abroad. He expresses a deep concern for the trajectory of U.S. foreign policy, which he believes is driven by a combination of financial interests, political myopia, and a lack of moral compass. Wilkerson's views are underpinned by a strong belief in the need for a more restrained and thoughtful approach to international relations, one that prioritizes diplomacy over military action and considers the long-term consequences of foreign policy decisions. A significant portion of Wilkerson's conversation revolves around the critique of specific military actions such as the attack on civilians in Sevastopol and the broader implications of the war in Ukraine. He condemns the use of military force that results in civilian casualties, labeling such actions as acts of war and terrorism. Wilkerson argues that these tactics not only fail to achieve strategic objectives, but also escalate conflicts and engender long-term animosity. Wilkerson is particularly critical of political leaders whom he perceives as being willing to engage in military conflicts without due consideration of the human cost. He laments the lack of strategic thinking and moral leadership in Washington, expressing disappointment in figures who have historically advocated for military solutions to complex international problems. Wilkerson's disillusionment extends to the decision-making processes within the White House, where he believes there is a deficit of intellectual rigor and ethical judgment. Wilkerson suggests that financial interests, particularly those related to the military-industrial complex, play a significant role in the shaping of U.S. foreign policy. He posits that there are individuals and entities within the government and the defense sector who benefit from the perpetuation of conflicts, leading to a foreign policy that is more concerned with profit than with peace or stability. The conversation touches on the role of nuclear weapons in international relations, with Wilkerson expressing concern about the reliance of nuclear deterrence as a means for maintaining global power dynamics. He warns of the dangers inherent in this approach, highlighting the potential for catastrophic consequences if nuclear weapons are used in the conflict. Looking into the future, Wilkerson advocates for a re-evaluation of America's role in the world. He calls for a foreign policy that is less interventionist and more focused on building partnerships and addressing global challenges through cooperation. Wilkerson's vision is one of a United States that leads by example, promoting peace and stability through diplomatic efforts rather than through military might. In conclusion, Larry Wilkerson's view represents a sobering assessment of the current state state of American foreign policy and military engagement. His insights challenge the status quo and call for a fundamental shift in how the United States interacts with the world. Wilkerson's perspective serves as a reminder of the importance of ethical leadership, strategic foresight, and the pursuit of peace in the complex landscape of international relations. Now let's go to the interview with Jaques Baud. In this recent interview, Jaques Baud articulated his views on a range of pressing international issues, offering critical analysis of the current geopolitical landscape. Baud's insights delve into the complexities of global conflicts, the shifting power dynamics, and the role of major players on the world stage. Baud begins by addressing the recent Ukrainian attack on Russian territory, a move that targeted civilians with cluster bombs supplied by the United States. This action raises significant ethical questions regarding Ukraine's military strategy and the moral implications of such attacks. Moreover, it casts doubt on the United States' oversight of its allies' use of American-provided weaponry. The conversation further explores the broader strategic miscalculation of Western intelligence in predicting the conflict's trajectory in Ukraine. Baud suggests that the West has overestimated its capabilities while underestimating Russia's resilience. This misjudgment has led to a series of strategic blunders, reinforcing Russian national sentiment rather than diminishing it. Baud also touches upon the privatization of essential services such as firefighting and healthcare and contrasts this with Russia's mixed approach to societal needs. He critiques the Western military-industrial complex for its profit-driven motives, which starkly contrasts with Russia's state-controlled defense industry that prioritizes national interests over financial gain. The interview sheds light on the changing geopolitical landscape, particularly in the Middle East, and the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. Baud emphasizes the importance of distinguishing between Zionism as a political ideology and Judaism as a religion and culture. He argues that conflating the two can lead to increased anti-Semitism and that Zionist organizations may inadvertently exacerbate the problem by not clarifying this distinction. Jaques Baud's interview with Nima at Dialogue Works presents a sobering perspective on the current state of international affairs. His analysis underscores the need for a more nuanced understanding of global conflicts and the consequences of power struggles. Baud's views challenge us to reconsider the narratives presented by the mainstream media, to critically evaluate the actions of nations on the global stage. Okay, now let's go into the reporting done by Glen Greenwald, starting with his report on Julian Assange's release. Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, became a controversial figure after releasing classified information that exposed various government activities. His subsequent detention sparked debate on the rights of journalists versus national security concerns. Greenwald's reporting delves into the intricate details of Assange's plea deal with the United States, which allowed him to avoid further imprisonment. According to Greenwald, Assange agreed to plead guilty to a single felony charge, with prosecutors seeking a 62-month sentence equivalent to the time already served. This arrangement would enable Assange to return to his native Australia without additional constraints. Greenwald's analysis of the plea deal underscores its significance not only for Assange but also for the principles of press freedom. Greenwald's narrative paints a vivid picture of Assange's ordeal from his voluntary confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy to his imprisonment in London's high-security Belmarsh prison. He emphasizes the personal cost to Assange, who endured nearly 15 years of various forms of detention, and the psychological toll it took on him and his family. Greenwald argues that the pursuit of Assange was less about bringing him to trial and more about sending a chilling message to journalists worldwide. He posits that the U.S. government's actions were intended to deter future whistleblowers and maintain a veil of secrecy over its operations. Greenwald's reporting suggests that Assange's release, while a victory for him personally, also represents a triumph for journalistic freedom. A significant aspect of Greenwald's reporting is the emphasis on global campaign for Assange's release. He highlights the efforts of grassroots organizations, legislators, and international bodies that created the necessary momentum for negotiations with the U.S. Department of Justice. This collective action, Greenwald notes, was instrumental in securing Assange's freedom. In conclusion, Greenwald's reporting on Julian Assange's release is a powerful narrative that champions the rights of journalists and the public's right to know. It serves as a reminder of the importance of press freedom in holding governments accountable and the need for collective action to protect this fundamental right. Assange's release, as Greenwald poignantly notes, is not just about one man's freedom, but the freedom of all who believe in the power of transparency and truth. Now let's go on to his reporting on the Crimean terror attack over the weekend. Greenwald's reporting paints a picture of a conflict that has spiraled far beyond its initial scope, transforming into a proxy war between the United States, NATO, and Russia, with Ukraine serving as a battleground. The crux of the matter, as Greenwald points out, lies in the question of American interests in the region. He challenges the narrative that the U.S. involvement is driven by a duty to protect democracy, instead suggesting that the true beneficiaries are arms dealers, the U.S. intelligence community, and corrupt Ukrainian officials. The journalist delves into the historical context, tracing the tensions back to 2014, the 2014 coup, supported and funded by the United States, which led to Russia's annexation of Crimea. This region, predominantly Russian-speaking and ethnically Russian, has shown a clear preference for governance by Moscow rather than Kiev. Greenwald suggests that the American public's stake in the governance of Crimea and the eastern provinces of Ukraine, highlighting the disconnect between U.S. foreign policy and the interests of its own citizens. A significant escalation occurred with the Biden administration's decision to lift restrictions on the use of U.S.-supplied weapons by Ukraine, allowing attacks on Russian soil. Greenwald reports the tragic incident with the missile strike in Crimea, which resulted in civilian casualties, including children. The Russian government has attributed this attack to the Ukrainian armed forces using U.S.-made missiles and holds Washington responsible due to the involvement of American specialists and satellite reconnaissance. Greenwald's reporting emphasizes the gravity of the situation as Russia vows a response to what it perceives as an attack on its sovereign territory and citizens. He warns of the heightened risk of nuclear confrontation, drawing parallels to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and underscoring the potential for miscommunication or misconception to trigger a catastrophic chain of events. In conclusion, Glen Greenwald reporting on the Ukraine-U.S. bombing of civilians in Crimea serves as a terrifying reminder of the perils of international power plays. It calls into question the narratives that justify interventions and highlights the dire consequences of escalating conflicts. As the world watches the unfolding events in Crimea, Greenwald's insight compels us to consider the broader implications of such actions and the urgent need for diplomatic solutions to prevent further loss of life and the specter of nuclear war. All right, now let's go to a special interview conversation between Alexander Dugin and Pepe Escobar. This conversation between the two was hosted by Dimitri Sims Jr. on the New Rules podcast, and it delves into a complex web of geopolitical tensions and strategies. The dialogue is set against the backdrop of recent global events, including Putin's visit to North Korea and Vietnam, the movement of Russian warships to Cuba, and the broader implications of these actions on the global stage. Dugin, a political philosopher, and Escobar, a veteran journalist, discuss the message Russia is sending to the West through these maneuvers. Dugin asserts that Russia is declaring its return to the global arena, abandoning its previously polite pro-Western stance. He interprets these events as Russia's readiness to engage in conflict if provoked by the West, suggesting a willingness to distribute nuclear weapons to allies against Western hegemony. This, he argues, is a response to the West's disregard for Russia's red lines and a move towards a multipolar world order. Escobar echoes Dugin's sentiments, emphasizing the significance of Russia's strategic partnerships, particularly with North Korea. He suggests that these partnerships are laying the groundwork for a new pan-security arrangement, which he views as a direct challenge to the West's understanding of global security. Escobar also touches upon the economic aspects, discussing the moves towards de-dollarization and the establishment of alternative payment systems, which he believes are crucial steps towards a multipolar world. The conversation also touches on the potential for proxy wars, with Dugin suggesting that Russia could support opposition forces within Western countries, further escalating global tensions. Both speakers discussed the role of the United States and the possibility of a Trump presidency in de-escalating the situation. They expressed skepticism about the ability of the Western elite to adapt and learn from their mistakes, citing a deep entrenchment in their own ideologies. In the Middle East, Dugin sees the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah as part of a broader global resistance against unipolarity, with Israel acting as a proxy for the United States. He interprets the tensions as both a religious, eschatological scenario and a geopolitical struggle. Escobar, on the other hand, highlights the admiration for Hezbollah and similar groups within the global majority for their practical efforts to resist Western dominance. The conversation would conclude by reflecting on the broader implications of the conversation. It reveals a stark and somewhat alarming picture of a world on the brink of significant change, with old alliances being questioned and new ones forming. The discussion between Dugin and Escobar serves as a reminder of the complexities of international relations and the delicate balance of power that holds the current global order in place. It also underscores the potential for a shift towards a more multipolar world, where power is more evenly distributed and no single nation or bloc dominates the global narrative. This conversation between Dugin and Escobar is a profound exploration of the current geopolitical landscape, offering insights into the minds of two thinkers who are deeply engaged with the shifting tides of global power. Their dialogue is a testament to the ongoing debates about the future of international relations and the shape of the world to come. All right, now let's shift over to Danny Haiphong's interview with Richard Medhurst. And this is the first time that I've read anything or heard anything from that particular journalist. Richard Medhurst, in his recent interview with Danny Haiphong, presents a nuanced perspective on the geopolitical shifts and diplomatic efforts in the context of a multipolar world, particularly focusing on the Middle East and Palestinian cause. Medhurst acknowledges that emergence of a multipolar world led by nations such as China, Russia, and Iran, which he views as a positive development against the backdrop of Western hegemony and the unipolar world order that has prevailed since the Bretton Woods system. Medhurst appreciates the leadership of China, Russia, and Iran in fostering a multipolar world. He criticizes the use of the US dollar as a tool of imperialism manipulated to control markets and impose economic sanctions. He highlights the establishment of new organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS as alternatives to Western-dominated institutions like the G7. Medhurst also notes the military advancements of these nations, such as Iran's drone technology, which he claims contributed to Russia's success in Ukraine. Medhurst commends the diplomatic approach of China and Russia and Iran, contrasting it with what he perceives as the duplicitous nature of the Western diplomacy. He cites the peace deal mediated by China between Saudi Arabia and Iran as an example of constructive diplomacy that has led to improved relations in the region, including between Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Saudi Arabia and Syria. Medhurst expresses mixed feelings about the role of Russia and China in the Palestinian issue. He values their efforts to facilitate dialogue between Palestinian factions, such as Hamas and Fatah, which have been divided since 2006 elections. However, he is critical of Russia's inaction against Israeli aggression in Syria, despite its military presence there. Medhurst understands the strategic rationale behind Russia's restraint but does not fully accept it, suggesting that Syria should demand more support in exchange for hosting a Russian base. Medhurst acknowledges the criticism that Russia and China have not done enough for Palestine, but he also defends their positions. He speculates that there may be unseen support, such as the transfer of technology and intelligence from Russia to Iran, and by extension to the Palestinian resistance. He emphasizes the importance of respecting Iran's achievements in defense technology achieved under sanctions. Medhurst discusses China's diplomatic strategy, noting that China treats both the Palestinian factions and Israel with respect during negotiations. He argues that China's experience with long-term sanctions gives it a unique perspective on international relations. Medhurst believes that China's cautious approach is due to complexity of the situation and the potential consequences of taking more aggressive stance against Israel. In conclusion, Richard Medhurst's views reflect a desire for a more balanced global power structure that challenges Western dominance. He sees the rise of a multipolar world as an opportunity for positive change, particularly in the Middle East, while he recognizes the limitations and cautious strategies of emerging powers like Russia and China. He remains hopeful that their involvement will lead to a more just and equitable international order, especially for the Palestinian people. Medhurst's interview with Danny Haiphong offers a critical yet hopeful analysis of the current geopolitical landscape, emphasizing the need for genuine diplomacy and the potential benefits of a multipolar world. His insights into the complexities of international relations and the struggles of the Palestinian people provide a thought-provoking perspective on the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Okay, now let's go on over to Russel Brand's interview with Neil Oliver, who Tucker Carlson interviewed last week. Neil Oliver's conversation with Russel Brand delves into a myriad of topics, but central to their discussion is the case of Julian Assange. Oliver expresses a profound sense of injustice regarding Assange's prolonged detention, which he views as a stark symbol of the threats to freedom of speech and democracy. He articulates a deep empathy for Assange's lost years, emphasizing the human cost of what he perceives as a battle against an individual by powerful syndicates. Oliver suggests that Assange's plight has revealed the existence of what he calls the crime syndicates, or competing power entities that have over time become emboldened to assert their dominance, disregarding democratic values and freedoms. He sees Assange as an unfortunate figure who became the focal point of these entities to demonstrate their power and willingness to override justice and due process. Moreover, Oliver reflects on the transformation of the media landscape, noting how Assange was initially embraced by legacy media as an anti-establishment icon, but was later abandoned, marking a pivotal moment in journalism and culture. He questions whether the internet's long-term consequences were fully anticipated by its creators, positing that while it was intended to serve the powerful for surveillance and data harvesting, it also unexpectedly empowered individuals like Assange to challenge them. In their conversation, Oliver and Brand also touch upon the broader implications of Assange's case for journalism, suggesting that the integrity once associated with traditional media has now migrated to alternative spaces. They discuss the cultural shift that has occurred since Assange's emergence, with figures like Assange becoming symbols of the changing dynamics between the establishment, the media, and the public. Oliver's views, as presented in the conversation, are a blend of personal reflection, cultural critique, and political analysis. He portrays Assange as a tragic hero of sorts, whose story is a cautionary tale about the fragility of freedoms we often take for granted and the ever-present danger of their erosion by unseen forces of power. In conclusion, Neil Oliver's perspective is one of concern for individual rights and freedom, skepticism toward the motives of powerful entities, and a call for awareness about the true nature of the forces shaping our society. His conversation with Russel Brand serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance in preserving the principles of democracy and free speech. Now let's go on over to Tucker Carlson's interview with Steve Sailer. This is the first time I listened to anything by him, but I found it very fascinating. In the recent thought-provoking interview with Tucker Carlson, Steve Sailer, an acclaimed journalist and author of the book Noticing, delves into the intricate tapestry of race relations and political strategies in contemporary America. The dialogue, rich with historical context and data-driven insights, sheds light on the paradoxes and ironies that underpin societal dynamics and the political landscape. The conversation opens with a critical examination of the Black Lives Matter movement. Sailer articulates the unintended consequences of the movement's actions, which, despite advocating for the value of Black lives, he have coincided with the surge in homicides and car crashes within African American communities. This stark reality represents a complex challenge to the movement's narrative and raises questions about the efficacy of its approach. As the discussion unfolds, Sailer and Carlson explore the Democratic Party's strategy of fostering animosity against what they term quote-unquote core Americans. This tactic, Sailer suggests, has led to an increase in anti-white racism in mainstream media and academia, a phenomenon that has largely gone unchallenged by the Republican Party. The lack of organizations dedicated to the welfare of rural whites further exacerbates this divide, leaving a significant portion of the population without a voice or advocate. Sailer's book, Noticing, emerges as a central piece in the conversation, offering a collection of journalism that spans 5 decades. The work encourages readers to trust their observations, reinforcing the idea that personal experiences often align with social science data. One of the key concepts discussed is the quote-unquote flight from white, where individuals and groups strategically distance themselves from being classified as white to reap the benefits of affirmative action and other government programs. The interview also touches on the contentious issues of genetics and race in social science. Sailer emphasizes the need for honest discourse about these topics, arguing that observed realities should not be overshadowed by politically correct narratives. The tension between these realities and the diversity initiatives that permeate various sectors, including education and aviation, is a recurring thing. Saylor critiques the shifts toward prioritizing diversity over competence, expressing concerns about the long-term effects of societal functions, the ambiguity surrounding the definition of quote-unquote Hispanics, and the inconsistencies in federal policies regarding racial preferences are highlighted as examples of the complexities of racial categorization. In conclusion, the conversation between Tucker Carlson and Steve Saylor offers a candid and nuanced perspective on the state of race relations and political strategies in America. It underscores the importance of acknowledging and addressing the ironies and complexities that shape our society. As we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of American politics and social dynamics, the insights from Saylor's journalism and his book Noticing serve as a valuable guide for understanding the undercurrents of our times. Okay, now let's go on over to Candace Owen's reporting on the interesting connection between Julian Assange and 9/11. In the realm of political commentary, few figures are as polarizing as Candace Owens. Her recent report delves into the contentious subject of 9/11, a topic that remains sensitive even decades after the event. Owen's approach is nothing short of audacious as she challenges the official narrative and posits alternative theories that have long been relegated to the fringes of public discourse. Owens begins her report by referencing the overwhelming response to a previous episode which spurred her to further investigate the events of 9/11. She positions herself as a crusader for truth, unafraid to confront uncomfortable questions. Her report coincides with the news of Julian Assange's release, whom she heralds as a martyr for transparency, unjustly punished for exposing the machinations of the powerful. Central to Owens' thesis is the idea that 9/11 was a catalyst for never-ending wars, a means to funnel money from taxpayers to the transnational security elite. She cites Assange's assertion that the true objective is not victory, but perpetual conflict, serving as a lucrative money laundering operation. Owen's rhetoric is charged, painting a picture of a government complicit in deceiving its citizens for financial gain. The report takes a darker turn as Owens delves into conspiracy theories surrounding foreknowledge of the attacks. She references an Israeli messaging service, Ojigo, claiming that employees received warnings hours before the tragedy unfolded. This allegation, she argues, was swept under the rug, a memory-hold piece of evidence that the public has forgotten. Owens does not shy away from controversy, implicating prominent figures like Larry Silverstein in her narrative. Silverstein, who acquired the lease for the Twin Towers shortly before the attacks, becomes a focal point of Owens' insinuations of insider knowledge and financial opportunism. The report concludes with a call to action, urging viewers to question the narratives fed to them and to resist the labels of quote-unquote conspiracy theorist or quote-unquote anti-Semitic that are often used to silence dissent. Owens positions herself as a patriot fighting against what she perceives as an anti-American sentiment within the media. Now let's move on to Katie Halper's continued discussion with Marc Lamont regarding public support for Palestine or public criticism of Israel in the legacy media. Particularly, this episode highlights the debate between Marc Lamont and Alan Dershowitz. In this debate between these two journalists centered on the complex and contentious issue of Palestinian freedom and the broader Middle Eastern political landscape. Marc Lamont, anthropologist with a keen interest in race, citizenship, identity, and the Black Muslim diaspora, brought a multifaceted perspective to the discussion. His engagement with the subject matter intensified after his tenure with CNN, where he was initially brought on to debate as a generic Democrat strategist. Marc Lamont argued that, contrary to Alan Dershowitz's claim, Israel's occupation of Gaza did not end in 2005. He cited international standards for occupation, emphasizing that Israel still controls electromagnetic airspace, naval space, and the population registry, thereby meeting all conditions of occupation as recognized by international law and the United States government. Dershowitz countered that a military occupation could continue until the military threat is over, a point that Hill acknowledged, but with the caveat that it is still constituting a occupation. The debate took a personal turn when Marc Lamont recounted his experiences in Ferguson during the summer of 2014, drawing parallels between the solidarity expressed there and the situations in Gaza during the Operation Protective Edge. His subsequent visit to Palestine with the Dream Defenders profoundly influenced his views, particularly after witnessing the conditions of East Jerusalem and the West Bank and Hebron. A significant portion of the debate addressed the backlash Hill faced for his UN speech, particularly the phrase, quote unquote, from the river to the sea. Hill reflected on the manufactured outrage and the political weaponization of his words, noting that he had not used that phrase, critics would have found another reason to object. The discussion also touched upon the challenges faced by public figures like Hill and co-debater Brianna Gray when engaging with sensitive topics like Israel and Palestine. They shared experiences of being misrepresented and consequent reputational harm, highlighting the difficulties in navigating such polarized discourse. The debate between Marc Lamont, Hill, and Alan Dershowitz was a microcosm of a broader and highly polarized conversation surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It showcased the intricate interplay between personal experience, media representation, and the struggle for justice and freedom in the context of international law and public opinion. All right, now we're coming up on the final three reports. Reports from Kim Iverson. The first one is on Julian Assange. In a world where the freedom of the press is a cornerstone of democracy, the case of Julian Assange has been a litmus test for the limits of journalistic liberty. Kim Iverson's report on Assange's release from incarceration not only marks a significant moment for Assange himself, but also highlights the complex interplay between government authority and the pursuit of truth by journalists. Assange's decision to plead guilty to a single felony count of obtaining and disclosing national security material, as reported by Iverson, is a bittersweet resolution to a saga that has spanned over a decade. His release, while a personal triumph, casts a long shadow over the journalistic landscape. The guilty plea sets a precedent that could deter journalists from uncovering and reporting on government misdeeds, a fundamental role in a society that claims to value transparency and accountability. Iverson's emotional response to the news of Assange's impending freedom is palpable. The relief and shock that resonates through her words reflect the sentiments of many who have followed Assange's journey. The fact that Assange will be sentenced to time served, allowed him to return home to Australia, is indeed a cause for celebration, yet the implications of his plea deal cannot be overlooked. The report underscores the chilling effect that this case has had on journalism. The fear that has gripped those in the profession contemplating the potential repercussions of following in Assange's footsteps is a testament to the power dynamics at play. Iverson rightly points out that the act of obtaining and disclosing national security material should not be criminalized in a country that prides itself on press freedom. Moreover, Iverson's analysis extends beyond Assange's individual circumstances to the broader impact on democratic principles. The United States, often hailed as a beacon of democracy, finds its image tarnished by the very notion that exposing government wrongdoing could be deemed illegal. This erosion of journalistic freedom is a stark reminder that democracy is not a static achievement, but a constant work in progress, vulnerable to regression. The report also serves as a rallying cry for journalists and citizens alike to continue advocating for the right to inform and to be informed. Iverson's call to action, emphasizing the importance of clear and available goals, resonates with the power of collective voice. The Free Julian Assange movement success demonstrates that when people unite behind a specific cause, they can affect change, even against formidable opposition. In conclusion, while Julian Assange's release is undoubtedly a victory for him and his supporters, it is also a moment of reflection for journalists and advocates of free speech worldwide. Kim Iverson's report captures the complexity of emotions surrounding this event: joy, relief, shock, and sobering recognition of the challenges that lie ahead. As Assange steps back into a world that has both championed and chastised him, the journalistic community must grapple with the precedent set by his case and continue the fight for the unfettered pursuit of truth. Now let's go on to her report on the controversy surrounding Amazon. In recent expose, Kim Iverson unveiled a series of internal documents that cast a spotlight on the complex relationship between the Biden administration and Amazon, raising serious concerns about the erosion of free speech and the influence of government on private enterprises. The report, which has come to be known as the Amazon Files, reveals a disturbing narrative of governmental pressure applied to one of the world's largest retailers to censor books deemed controversial, not on the basis of legality or hate speech, but rather for challenging the administration's narrative. Representative Jim Jordan's investigation into the weaponization of federal committees brought to light internal communications from Amazon, and these documents disclosed that the White House actively pressured Amazon to suppress a variety of books, including those critical of Big Pharma, skeptical of COVID-19 vaccines, and even children's books that encouraged balanced discussion. Among the targeted were titles such as Miller's Review of Critical Vaccine Studies and The Vaccine Book, which offered impartial, fact-based resources for parents and researchers. The report emphasizes that Amazon's initial resistance to the administration's directives stemmed from its identity as a retailer, not a social media platform. Amazon argued that its role was to provide options based on the consumer demand, a principle that Iverson suggests should also apply to social media as a marketplace of ideas. However, the relentless pressure from the Biden administration led to Amazon implementing a do not promote status for flagged books, effectively burying them from public view. Iverson argues that the Biden administration's motive is control. By silencing dissenting voices, they aim to maintain a uniform narrative, especially on contentious issues like COVID-19 pandemic and pharmaceutical industry practices. This is not a matter of public safety or misinformation, but an attempt to quash any challenge to their authority. The implications of such governmental interference are profound. If the government can pressure a major bookstore to censor content, it sets a dangerous precedent where free speech is only permitted if it aligns with governmental views. Historically, such a censorship efforts are characteristic of authoritarian regimes where dissent is suppressed, the narrative is controlled, and power is maintained. The Amazon Files presents a case study in a broader conflict between corporate ethics and government mandates. The internal discussions with Amazon reveal a company grappling with ethical dilemmas, public backlash, and the role of a neutral platform. Ultimately, the decision to comply with government pressure reflects a capitulation that prioritizes governmental alignment over community standards. For Iverson, the revelation from the Amazon Files serves as a dire warning and a wake-up call for the American public. The rights enshrined in the Constitution are not mere words on paper, but principles that must be actively defended. The freedom to read, think, and express diverse opinions is under threat, and it is incumbent upon all citizens to remain vigilant and demand accountability from leaders. The actions of the Biden administration, as revealed by Iverson's reporting, and the efforts of Representative Jim Jordan represent a direct assault on the principles of free speech and open debate. In a society that values democracy, transparency, and accountability, it is essential to expose and challenge the abuse of power. The Amazon Files not only highlight a scandal, but also underscore the necessity of preserving the foundational principles of a free society. And lastly, let's talk about her reporting on RFK Jr. In a political landscape often dominated by two major parties, alternative voices struggle to find a platform from which to be heard. Kim Iverson's recent reporting sheds light on RFK Jr.'s innovative approach to circumvent traditional media barriers and engage with the electorate directly. Iverson's analysis begins with the Kennedy campaign's response to being sidelined from the CNN debate, a move that could have marginalized any lesser-known candidate. However, RFK Jr.'s team turned this obstacle into an opportunity by launching their own platform to broadcast Kennedy's response to the debate questions in real time. Iverson's reporting delves into the mechanics of the strategy, highlighting how it could potentially garner more viewership than the CNN debate itself. This approach not only challenges the status quo, but also raises questions about the role of media in political discourse. Iverson astutely points out that the debates are less about educating the public and more about generating ad revenue, a critique that resonates with many who feel disillusioned by the commercialization of politics. The report further explores the implications of RFK Jr.'s potential to disrupt the traditional two-party system. Iverson discusses the possibility of Kennedy winning key states, which could prevent either majority party candidate from securing the necessary electoral votes, thus throwing the election into the hands of Congress as per the 12th Amendment. This scenario, while unlikely, is not without precedent and serves as a reminder of the power of the third-party candidates to influence the outcomes of elections. Iverson's coverage is not just a recount of events, it's an examination of the underlying issues that plague the American electoral system. Through her reporting, Iverson conveys a sense of urgency for for reform and a call to action for those seeking change. She represents RFK Jr. not as a mere protest candidate, but as a serious contender with a message that resonates with a significant portion of the electorate. In conclusion, Kim Iverson's reporting on RFK Jr. is a compelling narrative that captures the essence of a campaign striving to break the mold. It is a testament to the power of innovative thinking in the face of adversity and a critique of a system that often stifles diverse voices. Iverson's work is a valuable contribution to the discourse on political representation and the need for more inclusive and equitable democratic process. All right, that was long. So I thank you for sticking till the end. If you've made it this far, be sure to like this if this was helpful for you at all. Be sure to share it on your social media platforms, on your accounts. That would really help. As I said yesterday in my report, I do this to help me process everything, but also I'd like to provide this for other people who don't have 5 or 6 hours to listen to all of this news day in and day out, so they can kind of synthesize this and have at least an idea of what's being said by some of these alternative voices. So that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow.